I expressly prohibited my husband from touching our joint savings to rescue his parents after his family labeled me a calculating financial parasite. My husband Liam and I have been married for 3 years. I work as a senior data analyst for a corporate insurance firm, and he is an urban planner. When we tied the knot, we agreed to completely merge our finances. We didn't do it blindly. We sat down at our cheap kitchen table in our first apartment with 2 laptops and built a shared financial ecosystem. We share one primary checking account, one high-yield savings account, and we established a strict rule where any purchase over $200 requires a mutual conversation. It was supposed to be the foundation of our trust. Liam's family hails from an affluent suburb of Boston, the kind of place where the driveways are circular and the landscaping is done by a crew that shows up twice a week. They have historically treated me like a suspicious interloper because I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Providence. My childhood home had a sagging front porch and a chain-link fence. Liam's childhood home had a name. I always tried to ignore their passive-aggressive digs, assuming they just needed more time to realize I wasn't going anywhere and that I actually loved their son. The absolute breaking point occurred last September. I had to fly to Chicago for a mandatory 4-day data science conference. Liam's mother, Helen, and his older sister, Chloe, drove down to our house to help him stain a newly built backyard deck while I was traveling. On the second evening, I was sitting alone in my hotel room feeling profoundly homesick. The room smelled like industrial carpet cleaner, and the hum of the air conditioner was giving me a headache. I opened the smartphone app for our living room pet camera just to check on our golden retriever. The camera records high-definition audio and video. I just wanted to see my dog sleeping on his rug. Instead, the feed loaded, and I saw Helen and Chloe sitting comfortably on our sofa. On the coffee table in front of them were 2 crystal wine glasses and the empty bottle of an expensive Pinot Noir I had specifically saved in the rack for our upcoming anniversary. I turned up the volume on my phone. The audio was crystal clear. I heard Chloe say, "I still cannot fathom why you let him put her name on the deed to this property." Helen sighed loudly, adjusting her cardigan, and replied, "We tried repeatedly to warn him. She comes from a family with absolutely zero generational assets. She is just using his pristine credit history to build her own permanent safety net. Once she feels financially secure enough, she is going to liquidate half of everything he built and vanish overnight. That is just how desperate people operate when they finally get access to real money." I sat frozen on my hotel bed in complete shock, watching the live feed. The sheer casualness of it is what broke me. They weren't arguing. They weren't having a heated debate. They were stating it as a boring, undisputed fact while drinking my wine in my living room. I immediately hit the button to record the clip directly to my phone's local storage. I watched it 3 more times. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the phone on the duvet. When my return flight landed on Sunday, it was raining. Liam picked me up at the terminal. I threw my luggage in the trunk and got into the passenger seat. Before he even put the car in drive to leave the airport parking garage, I pulled out my phone. I didn't say hello. I didn't ask about the deck. I just held the screen up between us and pressed play. The audio filled the quiet interior of the car. Helen's voice, Chloe's voice. Liam visibly cringed, his shoulders hiked up toward his ears. But instead of apologizing for them, he instantly started running damage control. He gripped the steering wheel and claimed his mother was just overprotective about complex property laws. Like that was a normal excuse. He said Chloe was notoriously cynical about marriage because of her own past relationships. He swore he would shut down that toxic narrative immediately. He promised me he would have a serious sit-down conversation with them the very next day. He never did. Whenever I casually brought it up over the following months, asking how the conversation went, he nervously deflected. He would say his mother was stressed about something else, or that it wasn't the right time to pick a fight. I realized he never actually confronted them, so I chose to drop it. I simply distanced myself from his relatives. I stopped going to Sunday dinners. I stopped sending holiday gifts. I opted out. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago. Liam and I have been aggressively saving to replace our deteriorating roof before the winter storms hit. Every month, a portion of our paychecks bypassed the checking account and went straight into the high-yield fund. We had been carefully scraping together exactly $28,500 in our emergency house fund. I tracked it on a shared Excel spreadsheet. On a Thursday evening, I was at my desk looking at that very spreadsheet when Liam came into my home office looking completely panicked. His face was pale. He shut the door behind him and leaned against it, breathing heavily. He told me his parents were suddenly facing a catastrophic legal emergency. His father had apparently co-signed a massive commercial lease for Chloe's failing boutique bakery in downtown Boston. Chloe had defaulted. The landlord wasn't just evicting her. He was aggressively suing them for breaking the contract early, going after his parents' assets as the guarantors. They desperately needed an immediate $14,000 cash injection to settle the lawsuit out of court before it permanently ruined their credit and attached a lien to their property. Liam nervously asked if we could temporarily transfer the money from the roof fund. I stared at him. I looked at the number on my screen, $28,500. Then I looked back at my husband. I closed my Excel spreadsheet and simply said absolutely not. He started pacing around my desk. He pleaded that his aging parents were facing imminent financial ruin. He said the settlement window was closing in 48 hours. I stayed in my chair. I calmly reminded him that just 10 months ago, his mother and sister sat in my own living room, drank my anniversary wine, and explicitly accused me of plotting to liquidate his assets to fund my life. I told him I was absolutely not going to hand over $14,000 of hard-earned money to rescue the exact people who confidently labeled me a calculating gold digger. Liam got incredibly defensive. His voice rose. He angrily claimed I was weaponizing a private conversation that I only heard because I was electronically eavesdropping. I told him I was checking on my dog, not spying. I told him the reality of what they truly thought didn't magically vanish just because it was supposed to be a secret. He loudly argued that letting his parents go bankrupt over a petty grudge was incredibly cruel. He stood over my desk, his face red, said, pointing a finger at me. You are watching them drown, just to prove a point. I looked him dead in the eye. I'm not bankrupting anyone. I am simply protecting my assets from desperate people, exactly as your mother advised you to do. That hit him like a physical blow. He stopped pacing. He stared at me for a long time, the anger draining out of his face and leaving behind something hard and unfamiliar. He packed a duffel bag that night and left. He has been staying at his parents' house in Boston since Sunday. Almost immediately, my phone started blowing up. Chloe sent me multiple furious text messages accusing me of being a heartless monster who is deliberately destroying their family out of pure spite. She called me a parasite. She said I was finally showing my true colors. I didn't reply to a single one. I blocked her number entirely. The next morning, I contacted Bowen, a reputable local contractor who had given us a quote for the roof 3 months prior. I told him we were ready to move forward and scheduled the replacement for the following month. I logged into our joint banking portal and initiated a wire transfer for the $12,000 deposit entirely from our joint account. The money cleared my end instantly. That was supposed to be the end of it. The money was locked in. The roof was getting fixed. But on Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting at my desk at the corporate office when my phone buzzed with an automated alert from our bank. It was a fraud prevention notification. I opened the app and logged in. The remaining balance in our high-yield savings account was zero. My heart hammered against my ribs. I refreshed the screen. Still zero. I clicked into the transaction history. There was a pending outgoing transfer initiated by Liam for $16,500. He had tried to empty the account. Because I had already wired the $12,000 to Bowen the day before, Liam's transfer had triggered a system flag for unusual activity, freezing the remaining funds entirely until one of the account holders verified the transaction. He hadn't just asked me for the money. When I said no, he went behind my back and tried to take all of it. He was going to drain the roof fund entirely and leave us with nothing. I called the bank immediately. I sat in an empty conference room on the 4th floor of my office building, my hands sweating against the glass table. I spoke to a fraud specialist and explicitly declined the $16,500 transfer. I told them my husband and I were in a dispute and requested that the account be locked down so that dual authorization was required for any withdrawal over $500. The representative agreed to implement the restriction. An hour later, my phone rang. It wasn't Liam. The caller ID showed Liam's father, Stellan. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. Hello, Stellan. We need to talk, he said. His voice was completely level. Not angry, not panicked, just heavy. It was the voice of a man who was used to sitting at the head of a table and having people quietly obey him. If this is about the lawsuit, Liam and I have already discussed it, I said. Liam is currently sitting at my kitchen table with his head in his hands, Stellan replied. He told me about the lock on the account. He told me you essentially trapped the remaining money. It's not trapped, I said, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. It's secured. For our roof, which is what we saved it for. Stellan sighed, the sound crackling through the phone speaker. You are tearing my son apart. You are making him choose between his wife and his family over a foolish misunderstanding between women. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I said. And I'm not making him choose. I just said no to handing over our savings. You are forcing a wedge where there doesn't need to be one. Stellan continued, his tone dropping an octave, becoming almost paternal and deeply condescending. Chloe made a business mistake. It happens. We are asking for a temporary bridge loan to keep the wolves from the door. You have the liquidity. Holding it back is vindictive. I thought Liam married a sensible woman. I am sensible, I said. Sensible women don't light their own house on fire to keep their mother-in-law warm. I hung up. I didn't wait for his response. I blocked Stellan's number too. When I got home from work that evening, the house was dark and quiet. Buster greeted me at the door, his tail thumping against the wall. I fed him, changed into sweatpants, and sat on the couch, the exact spot where Helen and Chloe had sat drinking my wine. The silence in the house felt incredibly heavy. At 8:15 p.m., I heard the sound of a key in the front door. Liam walked in. He looked exhausted. He was wearing the same clothes he had on when he left on Sunday. He didn't have his duffel bag with him. He didn't look angry, just entirely depleted. He walked into the kitchen and dropped a thick manila folder on the granite island. The slap of the paper against the stone echoed in the quiet room. I stood up and walked over to the kitchen. What is that? Liam wouldn't look me in the eye. He stared at the folder, tapping his index finger against the edge of it. The bank flagged the transfer. You locked the account. Yes, I said, because you tried to steal from us. I tried to save my parents from ruin, he snapped, his head snapping up, his eyes bloodshot. The $14,000 was exactly what they needed. The extra $2,000 was to cover the legal fees. I was going to pay it back into the account myself, from my own paychecks, over the next year. You didn't ask, I said. I told you no, and you tried to take it anyway. If I hadn't paid Bowen yesterday, you would have drained everything. You forced my hand, he shouted, his voice cracking. He leaned heavily against the counter. The deadline is tomorrow at noon. If the landlord doesn't have the cashier's check by noon, he files the paperwork with the court. My parents' house goes into jeopardy. The lien gets attached. You are literally watching them burn. They have assets, I said coldly. Stellan has a vintage car collection. Helen has jewelry. They can liquidate. That's what people with generational wealth do when they get desperate. Liam shook his head slowly. He looked at me like he didn't know who I was anymore. Then he slid the manila folder across the granite island toward me. They don't have the liquidity, Liam said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. The cars are leveraged. The house has a second mortgage they took out to fund the bakery in the first place. It's all a house of cards. If this lien hits, the whole thing comes down. I looked down at the folder. What is this, Liam? It's a solution, he said, since you locked the cash. I opened the folder. Inside was a stack of legal documents. The header on the top page read, Home Equity Line of Credit Agreement. My blood ran cold. I flipped to the second page. It was an application to draw $25,000 against the equity of our house. Our house. The one with my name on the deed. Stellan's lawyer drew it up this afternoon, Liam said, his voice completely flat. We have over $100,000 in equity. The bank can approve the draw by by tomorrow morning if we both sign it right now. It pays the settlement, it pays the lawyer, and we still have the cash in the locked account for your damn roof. I felt physically nauseous. I stared at the signature lines at the bottom of the page. You went to a lawyer, I said softly. You went to your father's lawyer, behind my back, and drew up paperwork to borrow against my home to bail out the sister who despises me. It's my home too, Liam said, his jaw tightening. I pay half the mortgage. I built the deck. I put the work in. And your mother said I was the one who was going to liquidate your assets, I said, a bitter laugh escaping my throat. She had it backwards. You're trying to liquidate ours for her. Just sign the paper, Liam said, stepping around the island, his physical presence suddenly crowding. We can fix our marriage later. We can go to counseling. We can figure it out. But right now, my family is bleeding out, and I need you to sign the paper. I looked down at the document. Then I looked up at him. The man I married was standing there, handing me a pen, asking me to put my own home at risk for people who wouldn't cross the street to pull me out of a fire. I didn't take the pen. I let his hand hover in the space between us, the cheap plastic clicking faintly against his thumbnail as his grip tightened. I'm not signing that, I said. My voice was surprisingly steady. I am not putting a lien on my house. It's our house, Liam insisted, his voice rising, the desperation cracking through his usually composed demeanor. And it's not a lien. It's a line of credit. We just draw what we need, and we pay it back. I will pay it back. Every cent. With what money, Liam? I asked. You were just going to steal $16,000 from our emergency fund. If you had the capacity to pay back a $25,000 loan, you wouldn't be trying to secretly drain the account I set up. You are suffocating, he yelled. He threw the pen down. It bounced off the manila folder and clattered onto the hardwood floor. Buster whimpered from the living room, his nails clicking against the floorboards as he retreated to his crate. My family is losing everything, and you are standing here doing math. Because the math is all that's keeping a roof over our heads, I fired back. Literally, Liam stared at me, his chest heaving. The exhaustion in his face curdled into something ugly and resentful. You know what? My mother was right. You don't care about family. You don't understand how this works because you never had anything to protect. You're just sitting on a pile of cash, watching us burn, and you feel entirely justified. There it was. He finally said it out loud. Pack the rest of your things, I told him. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. A strange, icy calm had settled over me. Don't come back tomorrow. Don't come back this weekend. He didn't argue. He turned his back to me, marched upstairs, and I listened to the aggressive thud of his footsteps. 10 minutes later, he came back down with a large suitcase and 2 hanging garment bags. He didn't look at me as he walked out the front door. The heavy deadbolt clicked into place behind him. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, just listening to the hum of the refrigerator. Then I walked over to the island, picked up the manila folder, and dropped it into the recycling bin. I went into my home office and sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop. I am a data analyst. When my world stops making sense, I look at the numbers. The numbers do not lie. The numbers do not make excuses. I logged into our joint banking portal. The high-yield savings account was still flagged and locked. The $12,000 wire to Bowen the contractor was marked as completed. But I wasn't looking at the savings anymore. I clicked over to our primary joint checking account and our shared credit card statements. I exported the last 12 months of transaction data into a raw CSV file. I opened Excel, formatted the columns, and built a pivot table. I isolated all outgoing transfers, Venmo transactions, Zelle payments, and cash withdrawals. I filtered out our mortgage, our utilities, our groceries, and my own expenses. I stared at the screen as the pattern emerged. In February, a Venmo transfer for $450. The note just said supplies. In March, a Zelle payment for $800 to an account I didn't recognize. In May, 3 separate cash withdrawals of $500 each from an ATM in downtown Boston, just 2 blocks from Chloe's boutique bakery. In July, a direct transfer of $1,200 to Stellan's checking account. It went on and on. Hundreds of dollars here, $1,000 there. Over the past 8 months, Liam had siphoned exactly $8,450 out of our joint checking account. He had been doing it in small, irregular increments, so I wouldn't notice the dent in our monthly cash flow. He wasn't suddenly bailing out his parents from a catastrophic, out-of-the-blue emergency. He had been quietly funding his sister's failing business for nearly a year. He knew they were drowning, and he had been feeding them our money behind my back while pretending to aggressively save for our roof. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I realized with sickening clarity that the $16,500 he tried to wire today wasn't a panicked mistake. It was just the grand finale. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch with a blanket over my legs, watching the streetlights filter through the blinds. At 8:00 a.m. on Friday morning, I called a lawyer. Her name was Nadia Hensley. She had handled a messy, high-asset divorce for a senior manager at my firm a few years ago. My colleague had described her as a human scalpel. I sat in my home office and explained the situation to Nadia over a consultation call. I laid out the timeline, the audio recording of the mother and sister, the attempted wire transfer, the locked savings account, the hidden transfers I found last night, and the HELOC application Liam brought home. You did the right thing freezing the liquid cash, Nadia said, her voice brisk and professional over the phone. But we have a problem with the house. If his name is on the mortgage, he is building equity, even if only your name is on the deed. Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state. If he's drowning in familial debt and you file for divorce, this gets incredibly messy. Has he taken out any lines of credit solely in his name? I don't know, I admitted, my stomach dropping. Pull your credit report right now, Nadia instructed. Pull his too, if you have his social security number and joint authorization. I want to know exactly what his debt-to-income ratio looks like as of this morning. Desperate people do not stop at one locked door. If he couldn't get the cash from your savings, and he couldn't get you to sign the HELOC, he is going to find another lever to pull. We need to know what that lever is before he pulls it. I kept her on speakerphone while I navigated to the credit bureau's website. I pulled my comprehensive report first. I scanned scanned through the open accounts, the perfect payment history, the excellent score. Everything looked normal. Then I scrolled down to the hard inquiries section. Nadia, I said, my voice tight. What do you see? There's a hard credit inquiry from a week ago, I said, reading the screen. From a subprime online lender. An unsecured personal loan application. For how much? It doesn't say, I replied, clicking on the entry. But I didn't authorize this. I didn't apply for anything. He used your information, Nadia said flatly. He tried to take out a personal loan in your name, probably assuming his own credit is already too leveraged, or his debt to income is blown. Did you get any mail from this lender? I thought back to the mail pile I had thrown on the entryway table earlier this week. I don't know. Maybe. Put a fraud alert on your social security number immediately. Lock your credit file, Nadia commanded. I am sending you an engagement letter. Sign it and send the retainer. We are filing for a financial restraining order the minute the courts open on Monday. We ended the call. My hands were shaking as I navigated through the credit bureau's security menus, locking my file down, erecting digital walls around my identity. My husband had tried to take out a loan in my name. The man who sat across from me at dinner, who walked the dog with me in the evenings, had committed identity fraud to save the sister who called me a parasite. I closed the laptop and rubbed my eyes. The exhaustion was a physical weight pressing down on my shoulders. Suddenly, Buster started barking aggressively at the front window. Not his happy, tail-wagging bark, his deep, territorial warning bark. I stood up from my desk and walked into the living room. I pulled back the edge of the curtain. A sleek, silver Audi SUV was parked at a crooked angle in my driveway, the passenger side tires resting completely on the front lawn. The engine was still running. The driver's side door slammed shut, and Chloe marched up my front walkway. She was wearing oversized designer sunglasses and a beige trench coat, carrying a leather tote bag that cost more than my first car. She didn't look like a woman whose bakery was going under. She looked like a woman who was furious that the help had refused an order. She reached the front porch and didn't bother with the doorbell. She balled her hand into a fist and started pounding on the heavy wooden door. Open the door, Chloe yelled, her voice muffled but sharp through the wood. I know you're in there. Liam's car isn't here, but yours is. Open the damn door. I stood in the hallway, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Buster was pacing back and forth, growling low in his throat. I grabbed him by the collar and commanded him to sit. Open it, she screamed, pounding harder. The stained glass insert in the door rattled in its frame. You ruined everything. He was going to sign it, and you ruined it. I walked slowly to the door. I didn't open it. I leaned toward the solid wood panel. Get off my property, Chloe, I said loudly. Or, I am calling the police. Call them, she shrieked back. Call them. Let everyone know what kind of selfish, pathetic trash Liam married. You trapped his money. He told us what you did. You locked the accounts. It's my money, I said through the door. And the accounts are staying locked. The deadline was noon. She screamed, her voice cracking with actual hysteria now. She kicked the bottom of the door, a heavy thud that reverberated through the floorboards. The landlord filed the paperwork. They put the lien on my parents' house. Are you happy now? You proved your little point, and now my parents are going to lose their home because of you. I closed my eyes. The settlement window had closed. The lawsuit was moving forward. Stellan and Helen were officially on the hook. Go away, Chloe, I said. Liam is done with you, she sneered, her voice dropping to a vicious, venomous pitch right against the doorframe. He's at the bank right now with my father. If you think you're keeping a single cent of that money, you're delusional. They are pulling the joint paperwork. They are taking it all. I stepped back from the door. The silence in the hallway rushed back in as Chloe finally stopped pounding. I heard her heavy footsteps retreat down the concrete walkway, followed by the aggressive slam of her car door. The Audi's engine revved too loud for our quiet neighborhood, and she peeled out of the driveway, taking a chunk of my front lawn with her tires. I didn't care about the grass. I ran back to my office. Chloe's words echoed in my head. They are pulling the joint paperwork. I refreshed the banking portal on my laptop. The high-yield savings was still flagged. The big money was safe. But my eyes dropped to the second line on the dashboard. Our primary checking account. The one our paychecks went into. The one we used to pay the mortgage, the utilities, the groceries, the insurance. Current balance, $34.50. I stared at the negative number. It was gone. All of it. The $7,800 we had in operating cash to cover the month's expenses. I clicked into the recent transactions. 30 minutes ago, an in-branch withdrawal had cleared for the entire available balance. He had walked into a physical location with his father, bypassed the online transfer limits, and pulled the cash out at the teller window. He even let an automated streaming subscription hit right after he emptied it, overdrafting the account and triggering a $35 penalty fee. He hadn't just taken the money to give his sister a bridge loan. He took my half of the mortgage payment. He took my gas money. He took the money for Buster's dog food. He was trying to financially suffocate me. I picked up my phone and called Nadia. I didn't care that it was past 5 o'clock on a Friday. She answered on the second ring. He drained the checking, I said. My voice sounded hollow, like I was speaking from inside a tunnel. How much? Nadia asked, the sound of a keyboard clacking loudly in the background. Everything. $7,800. He went into a branch. Can he do that? Legally? Yes, it's a joint account. The bank considers any individual on that account to have full right to 100% of the funds. But strategically? She paused, the typing stopping. It's the stupidest thing he could have done. He just handed a family court judge documented proof of financial dissipation. He's acting out of panic, not strategy. Stellan is probably in his ear, thinking they can bully you into signing the house over by cutting off your cash flow. What do I do? The mortgage is due in 10 days. You get in your car right now, Nadia commanded. You drive to a completely different bank. Not a different branch, a different bank entirely. Open an individual checking account solely in your name. You move your direct deposit from your employer immediately. We are not letting him put your house into default to force a distress sale. Do you have any individual credit cards? One, I said, from before we were married. It has a zero balance. Good. Put all your living expenses on that. Keep every single receipt. We will claim it all back in equity during verifying the asset split. Go to the bank now before they close for the weekend. I hung up, grabbed my keys, and drove to a local credit union 3 towns over. I sat in a cramped, glass-walled cubicle across from a branch manager named Arlo. He was young, maybe 25, wearing a slightly oversized suit. I had to sit there and calmly explain that I needed a new account immediately. But my credit file was completely locked down due to suspected identity fraud by my spouse. Arlo's eyes widened slightly, but he kept his professional composure. He made 3 phone calls, bypassed the automated credit check, and manually verified my identity using my passport and 2 recent W-2 forms. I walked out an hour later with a temporary debit card and a routing number that Liam knew nothing about. The weekend was an absolute nightmare of logistical warfare. I spent Saturday completely alone in the house, surrounded by the ghosts of my marriage. I sat at my laptop for 14 hours straight. I changed the passwords to my email, my work portals, my medical records. I logged our smart TV out of all joint accounts. I removed Liam's fingerprint access from our electronic front door lock and replaced it with a numeric PIN. Around noon, my cell phone suddenly dropped its signal. The bars in the top right corner vanished, replaced by a glaring SOS-only icon. I tried to make a call. Nothing. I tried to connect to the cellular data network. Nothing. I logged into our shared wireless carrier account on my laptop, using the home Wi-Fi. Liam was the primary account holder on the family plan. He had reported my phone stolen and permanently deactivated the SIM card. He was trying to isolate. If I couldn't make calls, I couldn't talk to my lawyer. If I didn't have data, I couldn't check the bank outside the house. I drove to a retail electronics store, bought a cheap prepaid phone outright, and activated a new number in the parking lot. I sat in the driver's seat of my car and emailed the new number to Nadia, to my boss, and to my parents, back in Providence. Every hour felt like a new, petty obstacle. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. On Monday morning, I had to go to work. I drove to the corporate park, badged into the building, and sat down at my desk. I am a senior data analyst. My job requires intense focus. I write SQL queries, build predictive models, and parse thousands of rows of insurance claims. But my brain was absolute static. I stared at my dual monitors, watching the cursor blink on a blank spreadsheet. At 10 o'clock, my manager, Imogen, walked over to my desk. She is a sharp, no-nonsense woman who usually only speaks to me about deliverables and quarterly targets. She leaned down and tapped her knuckles lightly on my desk. "Can I see you in my office for a minute?" she asked. I followed her into her office. She closed the door, which immediately made my stomach drop. "Are you all right?" Imogen asked, sitting behind her desk. "You look like you haven't slept in a week." And HR just flagged something highly unusual to me. "What happened?" I asked, gripping the arms of the guest chair. "Someone called the main reception desk this morning," Imogen said, watching my face carefully. "An older man. He claimed to be from an external auditing firm and aggressively demanded to be transferred to payroll. He wanted to verify your employment status, your current salary, and the routing number for your direct deposit. He claimed it was for a mandatory background check." My blood ran ice cold. "Stellan, our receptionist, transferred him to HR," Imogen continued. "And HR obviously refused to provide any employee financial data without your direct authorization. The man got incredibly belligerent, threatened legal action, and then hung up. Do you have any idea what this is about?" I closed my eyes. The humiliation burned in my chest. I pride myself on being professional. I keep my personal life entirely separate from my career. And now, my wealthy, entitled father-in-law was harassing my employer's payroll department, trying to track down my paycheck like a bounty hunter. I had to sit there in the harsh fluorescent lighting of my boss's office and explain that my husband's family was currently attempting to stalk my finances and bypass my bank security. I had to ask her to put a note in my employee file restricting all external inquiries about my employment. Imogen was sympathetic, but the look of pity in her eyes made me want to crawl under the floorboards. When I got back to my desk, I had an email waiting for me. It was from Liam's personal Gmail account. The subject line was blank. "You need to pay the mortgage on the 1st. You have all the cash locked up. I don't have anything left to contribute this month. If you let the house go into default to prove a point, that's on you." I stared at the screen. The sheer audacity of it left me breathless. He had drained our operating cash, handed it over to his sister's failing bakery, and now expected me to pay the entire mortgage entirely on my own, while blaming me for the fact that the emergency savings were frozen. I forwarded the email to Nadia. She replied 3 minutes later, "Pay the mortgage from your new individual account. Keep the receipt. We add it to his debt column in the settlement. Do not reply to his email. Do not communicate with him directly under any circumstances. If he wants to talk, he talks to me." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. I opened a new tab to log into the mortgage portal. Before I could even type in my password, my new prepaid phone buzzed on the desk. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Hey, it's Bowen," a gruff voice said on the other end. "The roofing contractor. Just calling to confirm our start date for next Tuesday. Materials are being delivered on Monday afternoon." "Yes, Tuesday is perfect," I said, relieved to have a normal, functional conversation. "We're ready." "Great," Bowen said. He paused, the sound of heavy machinery rumbling in the background on his end. "Listen, I also wanted to run something by you. Your husband called our office about an hour ago." My grip on the phone tightened. "He did?" "Yeah," Bowen sighed. "He said you guys were having some unexpected financial trouble and wanted to cancel the contract. He asked if we could refund the $12,000 deposit, but he wanted it wired to a different routing number than the one you paid with. Some account at a bank we've never dealt with before." I felt physically sick. Liam wasn't just trying to drain the checking. He was actively trying to claw back the money I had already spent to protect our house. He was trying to rip the roof off our heads to hand cash to his father. "What did you tell him?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I told him our policy is to refund strictly to the original payment method," Bowen said, his tone turning serious. "And since you're the one who signed the primary service agreement last week, I told him I couldn't cancel the job or move any money without speaking to you first." first. Frankly, the whole thing sounded shady as hell. Are we still doing this roof or not? We are doing the roof, Bowen, I said, my voice hardening. The contract stands. Do not accept any cancellations from him. Do not authorize any refunds. If he calls back, tell him to speak to my lawyer. Understood, Bowen said. See you Tuesday. I hung up the phone. I wasn't just getting divorced. I was under siege. Every vendor, every account, every piece of mail was a potential battleground. Liam and his family were probing the perimeter of my life, looking for any weak point, any unlocked door, any pile of cash they could grab. I spent the rest of the day in a state of hypervigilance. I double-checked every lock. I reviewed every statement. By the time I left the office at 6 o'clock, the sun was starting to set, casting long gray shadows across the parking lot. I drove home in silence. I pulled into my driveway, careful to avoid the deep tire ruts Chloe had torn into the grass. I unlocked the front door with my new code, stepped inside, and locked the deadbolt behind me. Buster trotted out of the kitchen, whining softly, sensing the tension radiating off me. I knelt down and buried my face in his golden fur, taking my first real breath of the day. Then, I heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping sound coming from the back of the house. I froze. Buster's ears snapped back, and a low growl started in his chest. He turned his head toward the kitchen, staring at the sliding glass doors that led out to the new deck. The tapping stopped. Then, the distinct metallic sound of a key sliding into the lock of the sliding glass door. Liam had a key to the back door. I hadn't changed that lock yet. I thought the deadbolt on the slider was engaged from the inside. But as I stood up, my heart pounding in my throat, I heard the heavy clunk of the lock disengaging. The glass door slid open on its tracks. Liam stepped out of the shadows of the deck and into the kitchen. The cool evening air rushed in behind him, smelling faintly of pine needles and damper. He was wearing the same clothes he had on when he left on Sunday, but they looked slept in now. His face was covered in dark stubble, and his eyes were sunken, rimmed with a terrifying, exhausted, manic energy. Buster let out a sharp, confused bark, his tail tucking between his legs. He recognized Liam, but dogs understand energy better than we do. He didn't run to greet him. He stayed pressed against my thigh. Liam didn't even look at me. He walked straight past the kitchen island and headed for the hallway leading to my home office. Liam, I said, my voice sharp. What are you doing? Getting my things, he muttered, not breaking stride. I followed him, my heart hammering. You already took your things. He walked into the office and went straight for the small fireproof safe tucked under the window. He dropped to one knee and started punching in the code. He knew the code. It was our wedding anniversary. The heavy steel door clicked open. He reached inside and started pulling out documents, passports, birth certificates, the physical deed to the house, the title to my car. Stop, I said, stepping into the doorway. Put those back. He ignored me. He shoved the manila folders into his jacket. Then he reached for the small stack of physical savings bonds my grandmother had bought for me when I was a child. They weren't worth a fortune, maybe a few $1,000s, but they were in my maiden name. They were mine. I said put it back, I yelled, stepping forward and grabbing his arm. He ripped his arm away with a violent jerk that sent me stumbling back a step. He didn't hit me. He didn't even raise his hand, but the force of the movement was enough to make Buster snarl, a deep guttural sound I had never heard him make before. The dog stepped between us, the fur on his spine standing straight up, baring his teeth at Liam. Liam froze. He looked down at the golden retriever he had helped raise from an 8-week-old puppy. Buster, he said, his voice cracking. It's me. Knock it off. Buster didn't move. He held his ground, a low, continuous growl vibrating in his chest. Liam looked from the dog to me, his face contorted with a mixture of grief and pure venomous hatred. You turned my own dog against me. You did that yourself, I said, my voice shaking but my gaze locked on his. You broke into my house. It's my house, he screamed, the sound echoing off the walls, making me flinch. My name is on the mortgage. I have every legal right to be here, and I have every right to my own documents. Those bonds are mine. They were bought before we even met. I don't care, he snapped. You locked up $28,000 of our money. You cut off my cell phone. You think you can just erase me? My father's lawyer is drafting the papers right now. You want to play hardball? We'll see how you like it when a judge orders the immediate sale of this property to satisfy the marital debts. What marital debts? I demanded. We don't have any debt besides the mortgage. Liam offered a cold, humorless smile. It didn't reach his exhausted eyes. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. He threw it onto my desk. We do now, he said quietly. He turned around, gave Buster a wide berth, and walked out of the office. I heard his heavy boots on the hardwood, the sliding glass door opening and closing, and the metallic clunk of the lock sliding back into place. I waited until I heard the sound of an engine starting in the street behind our house. He had parked a block over and walked through the neighbors' yards to access the back gate. He didn't want me to see him coming. I walked over to the desk and picked up the crumpled paper. It was a receipt from a law firm in downtown Boston, a retainer fee for $25,000, paid in full. I looked at the payment method at the bottom of the page. It was a Visa credit card number, a card I hadn't used in over 2 years. It was the joint emergency card we had opened right after the wedding to cover the closing costs on the house, and we had paid it off completely. I had completely forgotten it existed because the physical plastic card had expired, and I had never activated the replacement. But Liam had. He had maxed out a $25,000 joint line of credit to hire a vicious divorce attorney, and because my name was on the account as a joint holder, I was legally on the hook for half of that debt. He had found his lever. He couldn't get the cash from the savings, so he manufactured a massive liability that we would both have to absorb. I sank into my office chair, the paper shaking in my hand. He wasn't just trying to save his parents anymore. He was trying to financially destroy me for refusing to comply. I didn't sleep again that night. I sat at my desk, cataloging every single item in the fireproof safe, documenting exactly what he had taken. I sent an email to Nadia with a scanned copy of the law firm receipt, explaining what happened with the credit card. Nadia called me at 7:30 the next morning. She didn't bother with small talk. Did you call the credit card company? She asked. asked. I tried, I said, rubbing my burning eyes. They told me the account is currently maxed out and that any dispute regarding the validity of the charge has to go through their fraud department. But since Liam is an authorized user, it's a civil matter. They won't reverse it. Of course they won't, Nadia said, her voice tight. He's weaponizing the marital estate. It's a classic scorched earth tactic. He's trying to rack up enough joint debt to force you to liquidate the house just to pay it off. Listen to me. The ex parte motion for the financial restraining order is being filed in exactly 90 minutes. But we need to address the physical security of the property. He has a key to the back door. I'll call a locksmith today, I said. No, Nadia corrected. You call them right now. Have them there within the hour. Change every single lock on that house. And I want you to install exterior cameras. Not just the pet cam. I mean hardwired motion sensor cameras facing the driveway and the back deck. If he comes back, I want him on tape. Can I legally do that? Keep him out of a house he pays the mortgage on? Until the judge rules on the temporary orders, it's a gray area, Nadia admitted. But right now, possession is 9/10 of the law, and he has already demonstrated erratic behavior by entering unannounced and removing assets from a safe. If he shows up and the key doesn't work, let him call the police. The police will tell him it's a civil matter and force him to leave. I hung up and immediately searched for emergency locksmiths. By 10 o'clock, a guy named Mike was drilling out the old deadbolts and installing heavy-duty, high-security locks on the front, back, and garage doors. It cost me $800 from my new individual checking account, but the sound of the new brass cylinders clicking into place was the first time I had felt even slightly safe in days. At noon, the heavy diesel engine of a flatbed truck rumbled down my street. I looked out the window. It was Bowen's crew. They were delivering the roofing materials. 2 massive pallets of charcoal gray shingles, rolls of underlayment, and stacks of flashing were carefully lowered onto my driveway by a hydraulic crane. A large orange metal dumpster was dropped onto the street directly in front of the house. It was a massive, highly visible declaration of intent. I was fixing the house. I was maintaining the asset. I was staying. I walked out onto the front porch as Bowen hopped down from the cab of his truck. He was wearing a faded Carhartt jacket and holding a clipboard. Afternoon, he said, handing me a delivery manifest. Just need a signature to confirm the materials dropped. Crew will be here at 7 a.m. sharp tomorrow to start the tear-off. I signed the paper, the pen pressing hard into the clipboard. Thank you, Bowen. Did Liam call back? Bowen shook his head, taking the clipboard. No, but I did get a weird voicemail on the office line late last night. Some older woman, very polite, very well-spoken, said she was your mother-in-law, and she wanted to speak to the owner of the company about a misunderstanding regarding the contract authorization. My stomach plummeted. Helen, what did you do? I asked. I deleted the voicemail. Bowen said flatly. Like I told you, my contract is with the person who signed the check. That's you. But I figure you should know they're still poking around, trying to find a way to kill the job. I appreciate it, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. See you tomorrow. I went back inside and locked the new deadbolt. The quiet of the house felt different now. It didn't feel empty. It felt besieged. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, my hands trembling slightly. Helen was calling my contractors. Stellan was calling my employer. Chloe was screaming on my porch. Liam was maxing out credit cards. They were operating like a synchronized unit, applying pressure to every single pillar of my life. My new prepaid phone buzzed on the counter. I flinched, staring at the screen. It was an email notification. The sender was an address I didn't immediately recognize, but the name attached to it was Helen's. I almost deleted it without opening it, but Nadia had told me to document everything. Every communication was potential evidence. I took a deep breath, tapped the screen, and opened the message. My dear, I am writing this because the current situation has escalated far beyond what any of us intended, and it is tearing this family apart. Liam is staying in his childhood bedroom, completely devastated. He cannot eat. He cannot sleep. He is deeply traumatized by the cruelty of your recent actions. I know you are angry about what you overheard. I will admit that Chloe and I spoke carelessly, but you must understand our perspective. We were simply trying to protect our son. When you come from a background like ours, you have to be vigilant. Surely, as a sensible woman, you can comprehend why we were cautious of someone with no familial safety net. However, freezing the savings and abandoning Liam in his darkest hour proves exactly what we feared. You lack the fundamental loyalty required for marriage. Stellan has secured the funds to settle the lawsuit for Chloe. The lien will be removed. We took care of our own, as families do. But Liam's eyes are finally open. He realizes now that he cannot build a life with a woman who treats marriage as a transactional ledger. Stellan's attorney will be sending your lawyer a settlement offer by the end of the week. We strongly advise you to accept it. If you choose to drag this through the courts out of spite, we will deploy every resource at our disposal to ensure you walk away with absolutely nothing. We will make the litigation so expensive that you will lose that house just paying your legal fees. Do the right thing. Take the offer. Walk away. Helen. I read the email 3 times. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it. She wasn't apologizing. She was justifying her cruelty, blaming me for my own reaction to it, and explicitly threatening to drown me in legal debt. We took care of our own, as families do. They had found the money. Stellan had somehow managed to scrounge up the cash to save Chloe's bakery. The immediate crisis was over for them, but the war had just begun for me. I forwarded the email to Nadia. I didn't add any commentary. The text spoke for itself. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Nadia. I got the email, she said. Her voice wasn't professional and brisk this time. It was dangerously calm. She put a threat of malicious litigation in writing. She explicitly stated their intent to bleed you financially. She says Stellan paid the settlement, I said, staring out the window at the orange dumpster on my street. I highly doubt Stellan magically found $30,000 in liquid cash over the weekend. Nadia replied, the sound of a printer whirring in the background. If his assets were as leveraged as Liam claimed, he couldn't just produce that kind of capital without leaving a paper trail, which means someone else financed it. Who? I don't know yet. Nadia said, but I'm pulling the property records for Stellan's house right now. If a new lien or second mortgage was recorded this morning, we'll see it. If not, they borrowed it from a private party. Does it matter where they got it? I asked. It matters because of what Liam did with that credit card, Nadia explained. If Stellan paid the settlement, then Liam didn't need $25,000 for an emergency retainer. No divorce lawyer requires a $25,000 retainer for a standard dissolution. That's absurd. I frowned, the pieces slowly clicking together in my exhausted brain. Then where did the credit card money go? That's exactly what I'm going to find out, Nadia said. Don't leave the house tonight. Keep the dog inside. If anyone comes to the door, call 911 immediately. I'm going to start digging into this credit card charge. I think your husband just made a fatal mistake. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark living room with Buster's head resting heavily on my knee, watching the red recording light of the new exterior cameras glowing faintly through the front window. Every time a car drove past, my chest tightened, my breath catching until the headlights faded down the street. But nobody came. The driveway remained empty. At 6:45 a.m., the street outside exploded with noise. Bowen's crew arrived in a fleet of heavy-duty pickup trucks, towing trailers loaded with hydraulic lifts. By 7 o'clock, there were 6 men on my roof tearing off the old asphalt shingles with flat bar pry tools. The sound was deafening, a relentless percussive scraping and thudding that shook the ceiling dust down onto my kitchen counters. It sounded like the house was being violently dismantled from the top down. I made coffee, put Buster in the laundry room with his bed and a radio turned up to drown out the banging, and opened my laptop at the kitchen island. My new prepaid phone buzzed at exactly 9:15 a.m. It was Nadia. I found the firm, she said, her voice sharp and completely devoid of pleasantries. The one on the $25,000 receipt he threw at you. Who are they? I asked, pulling up a blank browser tab to type in whatever name she gave me. Ives and Locke, Nadia said. Type it in. Tell me what you see on their homepage. I typed the name into the search bar and clicked the first link. The website was stark, modern, and expensive looking. Bold serif fonts over a high-resolution image of the Boston skyline. I scanned the practice areas listed across the top banner. Corporate restructuring. I read aloud. Commercial real estate. Contract litigation. I stopped, my eyes scanning the page again. Nadia, there's no family law section. They don't do divorces. Exactly, Nadia said, the vindication clear in her tone. They are commercial litigators. Specifically, they represent high-end commercial property management companies in the downtown district. I made a phone call to a colleague who practices in that specific courthouse. Ives and Locke is the firm representing the landlord who was suing your sister-in-law for breaking her bakery lease. I stared at the screen, the coffee turning to acid in my stomach. He didn't hire a divorce lawyer. No, he didn't, Nadia confirmed. He used your joint credit card to deposit $25,000 directly into the commercial firm's IOLTA trust account. He paid Chloe's settlement. He just used the firm's online payment portal, generated a receipt that vaguely said retainer fee, and brought it home to convince you he had hired a cutthroat divorce attorney. The sheer, calculated audacity of it left me momentarily breathless. He hadn't just stolen the money. He had meticulously staged a scene to terrorize me, weaponizing my own fear to hide what he had actually done. He forced me to finance his sister's bailout, creating a massive joint liability, and then tried to make me believe I was paying for my own legal destruction. Can we prove he paid the settlement? I asked, my voice tight. I'm subpoenaing the trust account records the minute the judge signs our temporary orders, Nadia said, which, by the way, he just did. The financial restraining order is officially active as of 9 o'clock this morning. Liam's accounts are frozen. He cannot legally move another dime, liquidate any assets, or incur any further joint debt without being in contempt of court. But we still have a problem with that Visa card. The credit card company considers it a valid charge because he authorized it. We have to address it in the asset split. So I'm still on the hook for half of his sister's debt, I said bitterly. For now, Nadia said. But judges do not look kindly on financial dissipation masked as legal retainers. He lied. We have the proof. But I need you to stay completely alert. When people like this realize their financial workarounds are shut down, they switch tactics. They go for physical control. She hung up, leaving me in the vibrating, noisy kitchen. The roofers were hammering directly over my head now, a rapid-fire rhythm that matched my pulse. I tried to log into my corporate VPN to start working, but I couldn't focus. I kept looking at the live feed of the security cameras on my second monitor. At 11:30 a.m., a nondescript gray sedan pulled up behind Bowen's heavy-duty trucks. A man stepped out. He wasn't Liam. He was wearing a beige windbreaker and carrying a thick manila envelope. He looked annoyed as he navigated around a stack of old torn shingles in the driveway and walked up to my front porch. He rang the doorbell. I walked to the hallway, checking the peephole just to be sure. I opened the door a few inches, keeping the heavy security chain engaged. Can I help you? I asked loudly over the noise of the construction. Are you? He checked the front of the envelope. Are you the homeowner? Yes. He slid the envelope through the crack in the door. You've been served. He didn't wait for a response. He turned around, jogged back to his sedan, and drove away. I closed the door, slid the chain off, and leaned against the wood, staring at the envelope in my hands. The return address in the corner belonged to a law firm I actually recognized, a prominent, incredibly expensive family law practice in Boston. Stellan must have put his own lawyer on retainer for Liam this morning. I tore the envelope open and pulled out the thick stack of legal documents. The header on the first page read, Emergency ex parte motion for exclusive possession of the marital residence. I read through the affidavit attached to the motion. It was signed by Liam. Under penalty of perjury, he claimed that I had suffered a severe psychological breakdown, that I had illegally and aggressively changed the locks on his primary residence, seized all of his financial assets without cause, and forced him out into the street. He claimed I was emotionally unstable and creating an unsafe environment, citing the fact that I was currently tearing the roof off the house without his consent. He was asking the judge to order me to vacate the premises within 48 48 hours so he could safely return to his home. It was a textbook Darvo tactic: deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. He was trying to weaponize domestic abuse statutes to get me thrown out of my own house. If the judge granted it, I would have 2 days to pack a bag, take my dog, and leave the property I paid for, handing the keys over to the man who was currently trying to bankrupt me. I took a picture of the summons with my prepaid phone and texted it to Nadia. She called me less than a minute later. "I see it," she said, her voice dropping into that dangerously calm register. "Don't panic. This is standard bullying. It's an intimidation tactic designed to make you concede the house before we even get to discovery. He knows he has no legal standing to force a partition sale right now, so he's trying to claim you're a danger to his well-being. The hearing is scheduled for Thursday morning," I said, reading the date stamped on the second page. "That's in 2 days. I will be there," Nadia said. "And we are going to walk into that courtroom with the audio recording of his mother, the proof of his secret bank transfers, the fraudulent credit card charge, and the email where Helen explicitly threatened malicious litigation. We are going to bury this motion before the judge even finishes his morning coffee." "Okay," I breathed out, leaning my forehead against the cool, dry wall of the hallway. "Okay, you need to inform your employer that you require Thursday morning off for an emergency court appearance," Nadia instructed. "Keep it brief. Don't give them details. Just secure the time." I ended the call and walked back to my office. I opened Microsoft Teams and sent a message to my manager, Imogen, asking if she had 5 minutes for a quick call. She replied instantly, "I was just about to message you. Let's get on a video call right now." I clicked the meeting link. Imogen's face appeared on my screen. She was sitting in her glass-walled office at the corporate headquarters, but she didn't look like her usual composed self. She looked deeply uncomfortable. "Imogen, I'm sorry to spring this on you, but I have a personal emergency and I need to take Thursday morning off," I started, trying to keep my voice professional. "Thursday is fine," Imogen said quickly, waving her hand dismissively. "But we need to talk about what happened an hour ago." My stomach tightened. "Did Stellan call again?" "No," Imogen said, leaning closer to her webcam. "It wasn't a phone call. A courier delivered a physical package to the executive reception desk addressed directly to the VP of Human Resources, with me copied on the manifest. The VP just pulled me into a meeting about it. I felt the blood drain from my face. What was in it?" Imogen sighed, looking down at something off camera. "It was an anonymous letter, but it contained printouts of your private banking details. It showed the high-yield savings account you locked down and the exact balance of $28,000. The letter alleged that you are currently engaged in complex financial fraud, that you are hiding assets from your family, and it heavily implied that, given your position as a senior data analyst handling sensitive corporate insurance claims, you are a severe liability to the firm's financial integrity." The room seemed to tilt slightly. They weren't just trying to take my house. They were trying to destroy my career. They knew that if I lost my job, I would lose my income, my health insurance, and my ability to pay Nadia's retainer. They were trying to cut my legs out from under me so I couldn't fight back in court. "Imogen, it's a lie," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of terror and pure rage. "It's my husband's family. We are in the middle of a vicious divorce, and they are trying to bankrupt me. The money in that account is my own savings for a roof replacement that is literally happening above my head right now." "I believe you," Imogen said softly. "The VP believes you. We both know you're a target right now. But because you handle millions of dollars in corporate claim data, and because someone explicitly accused you of financial irregularities with physical account printouts, HR is legally obligated to open an internal compliance investigation." "What does that mean for me?" I asked, my throat dry. "It means your access to the primary financial databases is being temporarily suspended," Imogen said, the regret evident in her eyes. "You aren't fired. You are on paid administrative leave starting tomorrow, pending the results of the internal audit. It usually takes 2 weeks. I stared at her. 2 weeks of sitting in my house, unable to work, waiting for corporate auditors to comb through my professional life because my mother-in-law decided to mail my bank statements to my boss. "I'm so sorry," Imogen said. "I fought them on it, but policy is policy." "It's okay, Imogen," I managed to say. "Thank you for telling me." I closed the laptop. The silence in my office was deafening, sharply contrasting with the aggressive hammering on the roof. I picked up my phone and called Nadia again. "They sent my bank statements to my employer," I said as soon as she answered. "They triggered an internal HR investigation. I'm on administrative leave." For a long moment, there was only silence on the line. When Nadia finally spoke, the professional detachment was gone. It was replaced by something cold and absolute. "They crossed the line," Nadia said quietly. "They moved from domestic asset disputes into tortious interference with your employment. They are using the mail to distribute your private financial documents to third parties to cause measurable economic damage." "What do we do?" "We stop playing defense," Nadia said. "I am amending our filings for Thursday morning. We aren't just fighting his motion for the house anymore. I am filing a civil suit against Liam, Stellan, and Helen for tortious interference and intentional infliction of emotional distress. And I am filing for an emergency protective order to bar them from contacting anyone associated with you, your vendors, or your employer." "Will the judge grant it?" I asked. "If he doesn't," Nadia said, her voice like cracking ice, "I will depose Stellan's country club friends, his business partners, and his commercial landlord. I will drag every single one of their leveraged assets into the public record to prove their financial motive for harassing you. By the time I'm done, their affluent little suburb is going to know exactly how broke they really are." She hung up. I put the phone down on the desk. Outside, the roofing crew started tossing the heavy bundles of new shingles onto the plywood decking, the massive thuds shaking the walls of the house. I walked into the laundry room, sat down on the linoleum floor next to Buster, and buried my hands in his fur. Thursday was in 48 hours. I had to walk into a courtroom and face the man I had slept next to for 3 years, knowing he was actively trying to ruin every single aspect of my life. Thursday morning broke cold and gray. I put on my most conservative navy blue suit, tied my hair back in a severe knot, and drove to the family court in downtown Boston. I didn't listen to the radio. I just listened to the hum of the tires on the asphalt. Nadia was already waiting for me outside courtroom 4B. She was wearing a tailored charcoal suit and carrying a thick leather briefcase. She didn't offer a reassuring smile or empty platitudes. She just handed me a printed copy of our amended response and nodded toward the heavy wooden doors. Liam was sitting on the opposite bench with his lawyer, a silver-haired man named Trask, who wore a three-piece suit that probably cost more than my first car. Stellan and Helen were sitting right behind them in the gallery. Helen was wearing a beige cashmere coat. She looked at me, her chin tilting up infinitesimally, a silent promise of the ruin she had threatened in her email. I sat down next to Nadia. I didn't look at them again. Judge Farrow called our case at exactly 9:15 a.m. She was a woman in her late 50s with sharp, tired eyes and a complete intolerance for nonsense. She adjusted her glasses and looked down at the filings. Counselor Trask, Judge Farrow said, her voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged room. You are moving for an emergency ex parte order to grant your client exclusive possession of the marital residence, alleging severe psychological instability and erratic behavior by the respondent. Yes, Your Honor, Trask said, standing smoothly. My client was locked out of his home without notice. The respondent has frozen all liquid assets and is currently destroying the roof of the property in a manic episode. My client fears for his safety and requires immediate access to his primary residence. A roof replacement, Nadia said, standing up. A roof replacement contracted and paid for prior to separation, Your Honor, to prevent structural water damage. The respondent is preserving the marital asset, not destroying it. As for the locked accounts, we have submitted documentation showing the petitioner attempted to drain $16,000 in joint funds 48 hours prior to this motion. Trask waved a hand. A misunderstanding regarding family loans, Your Honor. The immediate issue is the respondent's hostile lockout and the $25,000 joint liability my client was forced to incur simply to secure legal representation because he was financially starved. Judge Farrow frowned, flipping to a page in the file. I see the receipt for the retainer here. $25,000 is steep for a standard dissolution filing. It is, Your Honor, Nadia said, her voice ringing out, crisp and lethal, especially since Ives & Locke is a commercial real estate firm that does not practice family law. The courtroom went dead silent. I could hear the faint hum of the HVAC system. Liam's head snapped toward Nadia. His face went entirely white. Trask looked briefly confused, glancing down at his own notes. Your Honor, Nadia continued, stepping out from behind our table. I have submitted an expedited subpoena return from the Iolta Trust account of Ives & Locke. The $25,000 charge the petitioner placed on a joint Visa card did not go toward his legal retainer for this divorce. It was paid directly to a commercial landlord to settle a breach of contract lawsuit against the petitioner's sister Chloe. He fraudulently generated a receipt to disguise the dissipation of marital assets and is now attempting to hold my client liable for half of his sister's commercial debt. Judge Farrow's eyes narrowed. She looked at Trask. Counselor, did you review this receipt? I was provided the receipt by my client, Your Honor, Trask said, his smooth composure cracking just a fraction. He looked at Liam with a barely concealed glare. A lawyer hates nothing more than being lied to by their own client in front of a judge. Furthermore, Nadia said, not missing a beat, we are filing a civil complaint this morning against the petitioner and his parents, Stellan and Helen, for tortious interference. 48 hours ago, Helen explicitly threatened malicious litigation in an email to my client, which is marked as Exhibit C. Yesterday afternoon, they made good on that threat by anonymously mailing my client's private banking details to the Vice President of Human Resources at her employer, resulting in her immediate suspension. Objection, Trask said loudly. Those are baseless allegations of third-party actions. The courier receipt is stamped with Stellan's corporate account number, Your Honor, Nadia said flatly. We subpoenaed the delivery service at 8 o'clock last night. I heard a sharp intake of breath from the gallery behind me. Helen, Judge Farrow leaned back in her leather chair. She took off her glasses and set them on the bench. She looked at Liam, who was staring at his hands, his shoulders completely slumped. Then she looked past him, directly at Stellan and Helen. Motion for exclusive possession of the marital residence is denied, Judge Farrow stated, her voice like cracking a whip. The respondent will remain in the home. I am granting the emergency protective order. The petitioner, his family, and any agents acting on their behalf are strictly forbidden from contacting the respondent, her vendors, or her employer. Furthermore, I am ordering the petitioner to immediately assume sole liability for the $25,000 Visa charge. If I find out a single cent of that fraudulent transfer impacts the respondent's credit profile, I will hold you in contempt and sanction you into the ground. Are we clear? Yes, Your Honor, Liam whispered. I couldn't hear you, Judge Farrow snapped. Yes, Your Honor, Liam said, his voice cracking. We are adjourned, the judge said, slamming her gavel. I stood up. My knees were shaking, but my spine was completely straight. Nadia packed her briefcase, snapping the brass locks shut with an air of absolute finality. We walked down the center aisle. Liam stood up, looking like a hollowed-out shell of the man I married. I'm sorry, he said to me as I passed him. It was a pathetic, empty sound. I didn't stop. I didn't look at him. I walked out the heavy wooden doors, down the marble hallway, and out into the crisp Boston morning. 3 weeks later, the HR audit concluded. They cleared me of any wrongdoing, entirely convinced by the court records and Nadia's letter of intent regarding the tortious interference suit. Imogen called me personally to apologize for the bureaucratic nightmare and welcomed me back to work with full access. The divorce dragged on for another 7 months, but the fight was completely gone out of them. Stellan and Helen had to leverage their own house even further to pay off Liam's credit card debt and settle my civil suit out of court to keep their financial ruin out of the public record. Liam moved into a tiny apartment in Somerville. I bought out his remaining fraction of the equity in the house, using the very savings he had tried to steal from me. On a Tuesday evening in October, door, I pulled into my driveway. The new charcoal gray roof looked perfect against the fading autumn sky. The driveway was empty. The lawn was healing where Chloe had torn it up. I unlocked the front door with my key. Buster was waiting for me, his tail thumping a steady, happy rhythm against the drywall. I dropped my bag on the entryway table, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. The house was incredibly quiet. It wasn't the heavy, besieged silence from before. It was a clean, absolute stillness. It was the sound of a house that finally belonged entirely to me.